Hi there and welcome back to 355 Code. Today we're going to be talking about another very important part of game making, and that is input. In many different kinds of web apps and games that we're going to make, we are going to want to take input from the player. And last time we talked about buttons, which is one way of taking an input, but sometimes we need, more complex ways of taking in some kind of input, like something written, number, letters, etc. And so today we're just going to really go over how to create and use an input element. And at the end, we'll make a little kind of calculator example to show you how it all fits together. So what you see here is basic. We have a basic HTML set up, and I just have this wrapper div, and inside we have our input. And you can see that input is a self-closing tag, so we don't have input, we just have one kind of input tag here. And here's the CSS for the wrapper, just kind of basic centering. And soon we're going to hop into our JavaScript. So let me show you what this looks like here. So you can see this is our input. So as soon as you put in an input tag, you'll see something like this, and this is a text input, so this can be written in. And if you hop over to the documentation, you can see that there are many, many different kinds of inputs. And some of them will also alter the way that this input tag looks. So if we, for example, choose date here instead of text, and we run our code again, then you'll see that our input has changed so that we can take in a date. And for example, if we change it to checkbox, then you'll see that it turned into this little box that we can check. And this just happens by itself with the HTML, so you can explore all the different kind of inputs and see which one will be right for your game or your app. For now, we're just going to be using very simple text input, like I had before. And basically, to start playing around with this input, the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to select it. And I gave it this ID of input just so it would be a little easier to work with. So we'll have const input equals document dot get element by ID and input. So this will be our input, and we're going to be using an event listener. And this event listener is a very important event listener for inputs, and that is the input event listener. And basically what this does is it fires an event anytime that there is input to our into our input into this text field here. And then we're going to basically just execute a function. It's called handle input. Okay, and over here we're going to need to write our function. So handle input is going to be a function. And here you can see I'm using ES6. This is the same as if I were to write function, handle input, like that. Okay, so this is the same thing. And over here, what do I want to do? For now, let's just console.log input. Okay, and let's run our code. Let's open the console so we can see what's happening here. And you can see that every time that I write a letter, we have input. Okay, and another cool thing that you can do is you could also tap into the value of the input. So instead of console logging input here, what we could do is console input dot value. Okay, and then if we run our code and I type here, then you'll see that I'm actually getting back the value of the input right after I change it. So that's one great way to kind of manipulate input and just kind of read what's being put in. In most scenarios, we won't need that kind of constant monitoring of the change of an input element. But something that we will implement sometimes is some sort of button, which will get our value at a certain point in time when the user is finished with the input process. So let's add a button. And let's just call this button submit. Okay, and we'll also just give it an ID of button. Okay, just to be keep it very simplistic. And you know, you can give more meaningful names when you're writing out your code. So let's run our code again, and you can see here that we have a submit button right near our input over here. So what we can do is let's get rid of this. I'm going to comment out this code. Okay, and it's going to stay here, and you can check this out in the description of the video below. But for now, let's just select our button. And whoops. And then what we're going to want to do is add an event listener to the button, so that we learned how to do last time. And this is going to be for a click event. And let's just give it a function of handle click. And over here, let's write our function. And basically, what we want to do when we click here is let's console.log input.value. Okay, so let's run our code and let's say hello world. Okay, and then we click submit, and then we print here hello world. Okay, so this is much more efficient than getting the value every single time we make input into our text field, because you know, there's no reason to log in most scenarios. There's no reason to keep track of every single letter that the person is entering, unless you're building some kind of advanced search where you want to do filtering based on each letter, which could be a cool future project. But we're going to keep things simple for now. So, okay, now that you learned about input and how to kind of get the value of an input field, let's create our calculator. So for that, we're going to have two inputs. So we're going to add another input up here, and this one we'll call, let's just have the ID equals input 1. And this one on the bottom I'm going to change to input 2. And let's change the type to number. And here we'll also have type number. Okay, so let's run our code again. Okay, so we have both of our inputs over here. And you can see that because we chose type number, it basically also gives us these little arrows where we can go up and down and select a number, but you can also kind of do regular input. And you can see also that I'm trying to write letters now with my keyboard. I mean, maybe you can't see my fingers, but you should believe me, and I'm not. I can't write anything, but if I try to write numbers, then it writes. And that is because some of the input types, they do something called validation, and they make sure that you're only typing and you're only entering what you're supposed to be entering into the input. So because I told it that it's going to be a number, then it doesn't let me write any letters, and this will prevent errors in the future, because if I'm making a calculator and I try to add G to 5, then I'm going to have an error. And I could do the validation myself later on in the code, but it's easier just to put as many preventive measures to prevent these kind of things as possible. So great, we have two inputs, and now we just need to change this here so we have input 1, and I'm going to add here input 2. Great, and so what do we want basically to happen when we click our button. Okay, so in our handle click, we're not going to print input.value, but let's say number 1 will be equal to input 1 dot value, and whoops, and let's say will be equal to input 2 dot value, and then we just want to say console dot log plus 2. Okay, so we're basically doing a very simple addition calculation. Okay, so let's run our code, and here I'm going to put 3, here I'm going to put 6, submit, and we get 36. Okay, so why did that happen? Because even though this, our type of our input is number, when we tap into the value here, it reads it as a string. And then basically what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get a number here. And the way to do that, to be sure that we're going to be getting back a number, is to wrap this value in this number method. And now when we run our code, let's try that again. 3, 6, submit, and we get 9. And you can see in the console here that it's colored in blue, which really means that we are getting back a number. So let's say we want to display this here in our visually, because our users are not usually going to be using the console. So what we can do is we can just say result, okay, equals. So I can either create an element here. Another thing that we can do here is just add a simple p tag. Right, and we can say here, we can leave it empty, but give it an ID of result. Okay, and up here, right, we'll just say result equals get element by ID result, and then we can just say here result dot inner HTML equals and let's use a template literal here, answer, and here we'll add num1 plus num2. Okay, so let's test our code. Save, run, and 3 and 6, submit, and we get answer 9. Okay, so that's pretty much what we got here for you today. Again, we learned about input, and we saw different types of input, how to add a button that will make changes and will basically log what the input is and execute some kind of function based on that, and we implemented it with a example calculator. And you can go ahead and think of different ways that you can spice this up. You can have different buttons, let's say for add, for subtract, for divide, etc. And feel free to share your projects and get comments back in the comments below. And if you like this, please do like, please subscribe, because we're going to be having more videos like this in the future. So I'll see you next time.